Today's guest is less about mainstream music and a little bit more about what feels right. It's Egyptian American indie folk and pop singer-songwriter Michael Isaac. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to talk to you.
Yeah, me too. So I have listened to some of your music, but first, for anyone who isn't familiar, I want you to kind of see if you can describe your music and your sound in one sentence.
Totally. Yeah, so my music, I describe it as arabesque folk, which basically is a conglomeration of all of my influences from American folk music to classical Arabic music, which is the music I grew up on.
Nice. So when you say that it's the music you grew up on, is it traditionally not heard in Western music? Because I know that a lot of it just does sound very much like it's rooted deep in your culture.
Yeah, it's really not something that you would hear unless you specifically search for it.
Mhm.
And even, Western portrayals of Arabic music, there are certain stereotypical sounds that people associate it with in specific movies, Aladdin, obviously, cartoons and such. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a huge world of Arabic music out there that I think often gets ignored in Western spaces.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that particular music that you think doesn't really get as much of a spotlight?
Yeah, of course. So I mean, Arabic music it's definitely not one thing. The music I grew up on, a lot of what influences me is specifically classical Arabic music from Egypt. Cairo is a huge capital for music in the Arab world, especially, starting early 20th century, there was this boom in Cairo, and actually a bunch of artists would move to Cairo from the rest of the Arab world to make music and start making movies. And cinema became such a huge thing, and having songs in movies in Arabic movies became such a big thing in that time. And so I grew up watching some of these movies, and so one artist in particular that I grew up on was Abdul Halim Hafiz. He's like, the quintessential, I don't know who the comparison would be in an American context, but he's kind of like, the quintessential actor, singer, and performer, and personality, and he's kind of like in the hearts of a lot of Egyptians and a lot of people from the Arab world, and he's been a huge inspiration to me, as well as Kulthum is the probably the most famous and well loved singer of the entire Arab world, if not the whole Middle East. And her songs are incredible because they're always like 45 minutes long, if not more. And there are these like massive like operatic pieces. And the wonderful thing about Arabic music is it just takes you on a journey. It takes you to so many different ways and so many different places and feelings and moods, and all in the same song. It's very collaborative. It's very improvisational, and it's very free form at times, and super super emotional, very very emotional.
Is it safe to say that those particular artists are kind of household names for anybody who grew up listening to it? Like anybody who is familiar with that style of music would know the names you just mentioned.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
if you're in the diaspora, even though it's like this is the music that my generation, our parents grew up on, and it's the music that our parents showed us. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people that popped up, after my parents moved, but these two names I think were always like the king and queen in my head of Egyptian artists. And it's nice, like going back to the roots a bit, and it's music that I'll always go back to and really really
Yeah.
enjoy.
So, do you feel like your cultural background naturally finds its way into your music, or is it something that you're really intentional about including?
So at first, I was really trying to do it, honestly, maybe a little bit forcefully. So I started making music, alternative music, indie folk music, indie singer-songwriter. I was really in that scene and in that mood. You know, I listened to Phoebe Bridgers in high school and a lot of really amazing songwriters, American songwriters, and Joni Mitchell and also Bob Dylan later on. And so was really, really inspired by American folk music. And I made that for a while. And I didn't even think about really my cultural background at all. And like, I was really, set on making this kind of music. I knew how to play the guitar, some keyboard, vocals, obviously. Um, and so I don't think I was ignoring my cultural background at all. I think it's always been part of me and who I am. I think I just never really saw a way to bring it into my music until much more recently. I started putting out music in like 2022. So kind of I've always like had the idea. It was just always in the back of my mind. And so when I started trying to do it, there was this period of like I really wanted everything to like I wanted it to sound super Arabic. And it's like, what does that even mean? Like, what does it mean to sound Arabic? And so yeah, so I mean, I started like just experimenting a ton. And then I realized like it doesn't come from just being like, let me add this. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. Like it's not simple. Like you can't just like I'm gonna take Western music and then put it with Arabic music. It's not
Yeah.
like that. I think it took a lot of immersion, a lot of like revisiting all these musics that I grew up listening to, a lot of study and a lot of like really intense like just periods of like listening, just listening, like not making anything, just listening. Then when I came back to songwriting after this period of immersion, I noticed these things start to weave in naturally
Mhm.
and without me even realizing it. And so it's like my obsession with like sounding Arabic or like wanting it to sound super different, super unique. Like I didn't have to really try at that point. These things were
Yeah.
making their way into it naturally. So I guess to answer your question, for a while like it didn't come naturally, and this whole process of making this new album was like trying to figure out how that natural progression works. And I think
Yeah.
I finally cracked the code on it just with time and with more immersion.
It's interesting to hear how much thought and study almost went in to your songwriting because you weren't always a musician, if I'm correct. This is something you decided to pursue later in life, isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, I was always interested in music as a hobby, and I was always like playing my grandparents' piano at their house, and I was singing at church, I was in school choir, like I was always engaged with music, but I
Mhm.
never really saw it as a career until after, I finished my first year of college, and I'm like, I really want to make music, and it's really what I need to be doing right now, and so took some time off of school and moved back to my hometown in LA and just grinded full time on music. And that was really awesome because it really got me developing in that scene in LA and reconnecting with other musicians that I knew and meeting more musicians and just forming the basis of my identity as a musician and getting to play live. And so that was really, really, really wonderful. And so with the new direction that I took, it was a lot of it was inspired by moving back to New York, going to finish school, and like a lot of like what I study in school is history of the Middle East, especially musical history and cultural history. And so that became a big part of actually my writing process in learning about these musics and how they influence society. And I think my writing became a little bit larger than, my own story. It became, a collective story. It became the story of my ancestry and my culture and the collective culture of the people around me. And that was a really big growth experience for my artist identity as well, because it was, realizing there's a deeper message here that's begging to be explored, not just musically, but in the culture and with all of this thoughtful process.
So you mentioned that moment that you decided like this is something you wanted to pursue. What made you pivot into that decision? Was there something that was going on in your life during that time when you were in college or, what made you make that choice?
Yeah, no, it was a lot of things at once, but I at the time I was, in STEM. I didn't really know what I was wanting to do, so I was like studying neuroscience. I mean, I had this general interest in music and, music and the way that it impacts society, the way that it makes us feel better generally, the way that it brings us together. And so I was really eager to do that. Of course, I wasn't really sure how to study that or like what exactly to do. So I looked a little bit more at like neuroscience and psychology and like music psychology. And, I was starting to write a lot more at that period. I wrote my first song like pretty much like the week before I left for college. So I was really just starting to get into it at that point. And so after my first year of college, I'd spent a really nice summer in New York. I was doing an internship here and also taking a songwriting class at NYU. And that was a really also formative experience for my music because it was the first time I like was writing stuff that I really, really loved, and it wasn't just this thing that I did on the side. And I was like, I'm doing a disservice to myself if I don't put this stuff out. And so it ended up working out really nicely to move back home and being from such a wonderful urban setting like LA was such a blessing for me to get the opportunity to play there. And yeah, so it was really like, taking this pretty big risk that a lot of people don't do, especially coming from an Egyptian American background. It's like it's not a very common experience for people to take time off of school. It's one of those things that gets people like, oh, what's happening, like what's going on. But
Yeah.
my family was really supportive about it, and it was just great. It was a great time.
That's funny that you mentioned that, it not being typical of somebody, in any culture really, I think to like just kind of stop school, like stop what you're doing, stop the plan because you have this new idea. That's got to be scary for a lot of people to even present to their families. But you mentioned that your family was, so supportive of it. And have they always been kind of a cheerleader for you when it came to your music and your passion for songwriting?
Totally. My parents came to every single one of my shows in LA, which is so awesome. My grandpa as well. And even though it was like I would, when I first started playing shows, you know how they'll put you in a bar and at like 11:30 p.m. and my grandpa would pull up and it was just so sweet. And it was a nice way to bring my family and friends together as well. Of
Yeah.
course, even like when I moved to New York 2 years ago and started playing shows here, my parents were like, "Oh, we're so bummed that like we're missing it and like we want to fly out." And like it's really, really sweet. So yeah, they've been great cheerleaders. Like on their Apple Music, top artists of the year. It's really sweet.
I love that. So, growing up, did you ever feel like you had to choose between different parts of your identity or being an Egyptian American, did you feel like you kind of had to choose between the two, or did music become a place uh, for those two to kind of blend together and grow?
Yeah, I love that question. It's I actually wrote an essay about this that I might publish at some point, but this feeling of like you feel slightly alienated in the American context just because there are things that oh my parent I had to show my parents Bob Dylan. They didn't know who Bob
Yeah.
Dylan was.
Yeah.
Like I had to show my dad who Joni Mitchell was. He had no idea who she was.
Yeah.
Things like that. But at the same time, it's like when you're in like even when I was in music school in my gap year, I did some music classes as well. And like people are like, "Oh, do you know this artist?" And I'd be like, "No, I don't know." They're like, "You haven't heard of this like artist? Like this is like you've never listened to so and so?" And I'd be like, "No, because my parents played for me, Kulthum. Like, do you know Kulthum?
Yeah.
Like flip it around on them."
Yeah.
And so that was always like a funny experience where you feel a little bit like you're not in the loop entirely. Especially, I went to very, American dominated schools, primarily like white institutions, and it was nice to like have that exposure too. I mean, it's I got to learn a lot and made some really great friends as well. And those were the friends who told me about Bob Dylan and about
Yeah.
Joni Mitchell and stuff. So it's a it's a nice experience for sure. But it got even more complicated when I went to Egypt for the first time. And this was in 2022. So I went to Egypt for the first time when I was 19 years old. And I'd never seen, where I came from, only heard about the homeland through stories, through pictures. So it was just definitely a surreal experience going to Egypt for the first time and like experiencing like the warmth of the people and like getting to meet family members I'd never met before, and the scenery and the music and everything there was just so incredible. And but like it's like I kind of thought that when I would go to Egypt for the first time it would be kind of like one of those like prodigal son, like everybody would be like, oh, welcome back home. Like I went to Egypt and I was treated like an American. Like people like are very funny there. Like I try
Yeah.
to speak Arabic, they're like laughing at me. It's like they think I'm this American guy. So it was like that same feeling that I experienced, feeling like a little bit of an outsider in the
Yeah.
United States, and then going to Egypt and then also feeling like an outsider because I'd been away from this place my whole life.
Yeah.
And so that was also a surreal experience. There's this really wonderful novel by a novelist named Noor Naga. It's called If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English. And like definitely exactly my feelings, like every word in that book, like exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
So, this feeling like a stranger in both of your lands.
Yeah. I mean, that's got to be pretty tough to navigate where you feel like, like you said, an outsider or almost like you almost don't belong in either place because you're not necessarily from, like the way you explained it, it sounds like it's got to be kind of a difficult thing to work through.
Totally. And it's something you accept as well over time. Like I think after my first trip to Egypt, I'm like, no, like the next time I go, I'm gonna be a native. Like I'm gonna, talk with the people. I still have that desire. Like I still have that desire to go and be like, I've gotten
Mhm.
a little bit better. Like if I go, my first time that I went, people would speak to me immediately in English because they think I'm a foreigner. But
Yeah.
then the last time I went, they spoke to me in Arabic, and then when I opened my mouth, then they switched to English. But
Ah.
I'm getting somewhere. I'm getting somewhere. But yeah, it's a funny predicament to be in. Of course, there's definitely worse things to deal with. But I I've definitely accepted that it's like a nice multicultural identity to have. It's
Yeah.
it's also like it feels like my little, unique club in America, like getting to show people like, wait, no, like let me show you this artist named Kulthum. Like if I did that in Egypt, people are like, okay, like everyone knows who she is. Like,
Yeah.
it's a cool thing to like have this kind of insider knowledge, this native informant knowledge,
Yeah.
over here. Um, and then also kind of like in Egypt, like people think like, oh, you're cool because like you're, born and raised in the States. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of exotic.
Yeah. And do you feel like you almost have an advantage when it comes to, writing the type of music that you write because you have this unique perspective?
I think, yeah, I mean, advantage is an interesting way to put it. I think what it is that I feel like I have a story that a lot of people have, but no one is really saying it. There's very few people that are saying it.
Yeah.
And I think to be one of the spokespeople for that story is a really important thing for me that I feel like I've gained a lot of responsibility for. And so it be kind of like my music became like less of a way to just like get out my feelings, get out my emotions, like therapeutic process for myself. Like of course it's still that, but it also became this like sense of responsibility. Like I have entrusted in me like the story of like my community of other people who had the same, upbringing, and I really want to do justice to those stories. And
Yeah.
so portraying that lyrically and sonically is what the important thing here is, to be like, we're gonna we're gonna show what Egyptian American identity sounds like. And that was a huge challenge because it's what is Egyptian American identity, even, if you can even describe it in one thing. What does it sound like is a whole different ball game. So it's a really fun experimentation project to
Yeah.
see like what could come out of it. And you know, once we were kind of jamming on it for a long time, a lot of trial and error, some things just started popping up, and then we are leaning into them even more, and it just kind of came together. But it took a lot of time. Took a lot of time for sure.
Do you ever worry about being put in a box sonically, or does having this distinct sound feel like a strength for you?
I think that I think both. I think that I mean I'm always afraid to be put in a box, even when I was making alternative music.
Mhm.
I it's an easy box to be put in, you know, indie folk singer songwriter or whatever you make. It's boxes are how the media works, how consumerism works. So it's a to a level you have to accept it. But you know, a box that I'd really, you know, not want to be put in with this album is you know, this box of world music, or you
Mhm.
know, just because it's not Western, it's not run of the mill American music, suddenly it gets put in this category with like everyone else who's making music from all different parts of the world. And it's just like world music to me is such a funny term. And I
Yeah.
like laugh at it whenever I hear it, because it's like, you know, we're all
What
people
does it
of the
mean?
world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we all make world music. Like we all live on this planet, right? And so I really would hate for I would hate for people to simplify any kind of music to just being, you know, non-Western.
Yeah.
Because you know, each tradition, the like further you go outside of Western music, like there's so much like treasure in every single tradition that you find. And you know, there's a lot of people that, you know, blend certain traditions, and you know, it's a cool vibe, you know, people that have these multicultural backgrounds that express their identity through sound. It's such a great thing. It's just so easy to like fall into this trap of like just sounding like vaguely like ethnic, and not
Mhm.
being able to like place your music in any region like in particular. Like I'm a really big fan of like wanting to like localize my music. Like I want every, you know, melody that I use to be like, oh yeah, this specific scale or this specific pattern like originates in this part. Like I want to be knowledgeable in the vocabulary of the music that I'm playing. Like I want
Yeah.
to know what rhythm this is, you know. I it's easy to fall into the trap of like, oh yeah, I like how that sounds because it sounds kind of exotic. And that was also hard because it's like obviously you want to like just feel natural in the music that you're making, but you know, to be mindful of the tradition, you know, it's very important to be mindful of like, yes, this is a tradition, and this is what I'm doing with the tradition. I'm innovating it, and
Yeah.
being mindful about like the precedent that comes before you, and not just kind of going in there and you know, puzzling everything up. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's definitely something I struggled with a lot.
Yeah. You mentioned, your studies in neuroscience. When you would think about how music makes you feel, or what it's supposed to emote when you listen, has that come into your songwriting, consciously or subconsciously? Like, do you have particular, like, hopes and dreams for, like, what you want listeners to feel when they're listening to your stuff?
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, I studied neuro for a year, and worked as a research assistant in a really awesome music lab at USC while I was on my gap year as well. And was working on a really awesome project on nostalgia and musical nostalgia. And like we'd have these really awesome sessions with participants where we would just play songs for them, and we'd just be like, so what does that make you think of, and what memories does that bring up for you? And it kind of became something that I was like, wow, like music really has this ability to bring people back to a specific moment in
Mhm.
time, especially, you know, in their adolescence and their childhood. And I there's this really amazing term in Arabic which we call tarab, and that means like the closest word to it in English would be kind of like this enchantment, but it's specifically related to music. It's this getting fully enveloped in the sound of the music and just kind of like escaping yourself and having this out of body experience while you're listening to the music. So if there's anything I'd want people to feel, it's that, because then I'd feel like, okay, then I'm really, I'm really adding to this tradition of like what Arabic music is all about, is
Yeah.
invoking this enchantment in people. And yeah, so that would be, a joy if somebody told me that they felt this feeling. I'd be on top of the world.
Well, I feel like you've accomplished it because when I listened to the first couple songs of yours, it did feel like almost transcendent. Like this music was, and I don't want to say it and make you think that it's what you don't want people to think, but it felt otherworldly. It felt like this, like I couldn't describe it, but it made me feel, like it made me feel like I was sitting in whatever emotion I was in because it was just that kind of music that took you out of your head, if that makes
I
sense.
love that description so much. Really, really. Thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful way to put it. And I think that's my goal. I really want to take people on a journey.
Yeah.
And a big part of Arabic music is also this modulation in time, and kind of having this kind of experience of time travel as well, going from one place to another, from one time to another. And so I really appreciate you saying that. It's a really
Yeah.
great feeling.
Well, have you, regarding like your, I don't want to say your genre because I don't think your music necessarily fits into one particular genre, but have you ever felt pressure to be more commercial than what your music is?
I think we are entering an era where popular Arabic music, commercial Arabic music, is kind of entering the Western sphere. We're seeing a lot of like
Okay.
really cool Arabic pop singers pop up in the West, which I think is really awesome. Um, I've not felt like pressure to be commercial. It's been this kind of question of like what is the best way to get attention from audiences and to reach the widest audiences, and that answer tends to be like, well, making, a pop hit. Of course there's this like natural limitation with making something that's a little bit out of the ordinary, that it's not something that you can easily turn into a pop hit.
Mhm.
um, and I think that's something that I'll continue to think about. But as far as pressure goes, it's been more of like just a lingering question rather than something that I've been pressured to do. Especially like a lot of my favorite artists who are wonderfully successful never really had to go that commercial route. And so that is kind of the thing that I feel like gives me a lot of hope, for
Yeah.
for having a style that's definitely more um, non-pop, non-commercial.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, when I listened to your music at first, like those first few songs, they all kind of gave me that feeling of, this is, like I said, this is transcendent. This is, like it took me out of my mind. It put me in a different place. But then there was one particular song. It's your most listened to song on Spotify, and it's Hey Boy. And that song felt different than the rest. Can you, there's like this emotional tension in the track, and it almost feels unresolved at the end. So, can you tell us a bit about your process writing that song and what your intentions were for that song? Was it intentionally unresolved, or did that just kind of happen when you wrote it?
Interesting. I've never really heard that take on that song before. It's very, very interesting for you to say that. I think this is one of the songs that I wrote that one summer that I was taking that songwriting class at
Okay.
NYU. And it was one of the songs that I wrote, I think like in the second week of that class. And I wrote it as a love letter to my younger self. And um, I think it's been one of those songs that kind of the meaning changes over time the more that I hear it or play it. Or I mean, I actually haven't performed it in a long time actually. I think the last time I performed it live at a show was 2024 or something like that. And, the meaning changes because I wrote it at a particular point in my life where I was sending a love letter back, to a younger version of myself. But then
Yeah.
when I sang it, subsequently, I was then looking back at who I was when I was writing it. And then it becomes a
Right.
love letter to that self. And so, maybe I'll re-record it or re-perform it in a reimagined way, and it'll be a love letter to the artist who is really trying to figure out what this sound was, and like where I am now and looking forward to the future. It could be something very cool that I do. But yeah, I'm really honored at how many listens it got on Spotify, and I think a lot of people, when I would perform it, pulled me after and said like I really love that song.
Yeah.
And so yeah, even one of my friends now, she'll be like, "Oh yeah, it's always on my Spotify day list. I always listen to." I'm like, it's so funny. It's like also one of those things where it's like, when you put out a song more than a year and a half ago, it's like, wait,
Yeah.
I have like better stuff now, or like so it seems like in my head. But it's nice to see the progression of like what my music sounded like back then and what it sounds like now, and seeing the progression of it.
Well, it's interesting to hear you kind of work through, that thought process on that song in particular, because maybe that's why it feels almost unresolved, or I should say like open-ended, because it is the song that can kind of change over time. Like the meaning or the analyzation of the lyrics can kind of change over time because based off where you might be when you're listening.
Truly, yeah. I think it's really something that I always tell this story too, because it's one of those like open-ended songs as well. Like I had submitted it for Spotify playlisting, and a curator once was like, "Oh, we love this song and we really appreciate you sharing, and we hope you and your little boy are doing well."
Oh.
And he thought I was a father writing about my child. And I think that like it was so funny, and it made me think like, wow, like you can really, maybe it is open-ended in that way, that like if somebody thinks I'm like a father writing about my child, even though I was like 21 years old at the time, it's funny, but it was really cute. And yeah, it's nice to see the way that people connect with the music, especially my new songs on the upcoming album are much more abstract, and they're much more, I want to say, like metaphorical and allegorical, that really I'm not, giving it to anybody straight. And even I was listening to the new songs with my mom when I was visiting home, and she's like, like, can you explain this to me? Like, I'm just really curious. And I'm like, like sometimes I think in the new kind of consumer culture, like it's easy to like have a song, especially in those commercial songs where everything is pretty much spelled out, or like
Yeah.
the lyrics are very clear. And I think it's kind of fun to like leave things a little bit open and be like, how are people going to take this? It could
Yeah.
mean a lot of different things, and sometimes they mean a lot of different things to me, different situations in my life.
Yeah. So you mentioned that your newer music is so much different than some of your earlier stuff. Is there anything about the transition or the growth in your songwriting that has kind of even surprised you?
Yeah, totally. I think taking breaks from songwriting is very necessary. I think there's a lot of people who recommend like you have to write every day. You have to write a new song every day, and see how you progress. I think that's one way to tackle it. And I really respect people that do write every day. I don't think I could do that. Just it's a big commitment.
Yeah.
But I think, taking breaks from songwriting was really necessary for me, especially in this period where I wanted to just take in all of this like Arabic music and study it, and, learn how to play the oud, which is like a classical Arabic instrument. And that affected my songwriting more than anything. Learning how to play a new instrument, and, getting learning and like taking certain techniques from the oud and applying it to the guitar. That was
Mhm.
something. So, yeah, I mean, definitely I was very surprised with how things turned out. I didn't think that some of these sounds that we were able to accomplish were even possible. Like, I think, especially with Arabic scales, which are like, they don't use harmony. Arabic music doesn't use harmony at all, really. And so when we were approaching, adding Arabic scales with guitar patterns, with chord progressions, there was like some really cool aha moments where we're trying to figure out like, wow, this harmony actually works really well with this Arabic scale. And those moments were really, 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 really cool, honestly. And those were kind of the ones that surprised me the most because it's like, wow, I didn't even think this was possible. If you
Yeah.
ask, the most classically trained Arabic musicians as well, I don't think they'd necessarily agree to. So another kind of slight anxiety of mine that I'm like, am I butchering the tradition? Like, I hope I'm not. Like, I hope I'm not like doing a disservice
Yeah.
to this wonderful and rich musical tradition that I come from. Um, but I think experimentation is necessary, and we wouldn't have such a rich tradition if people didn't try new things with it.
Yeah.
And I've rationalized it as like, breaking tradition is part of the tradition. It's part of making it new and bringing it into 2026.
I really like that. If somebody was going to check out your music for the first time after hearing this conversation, is there a certain song you would want them to listen to start with?
I would definitely recommend people listen to Hold Your Keys, which is the latest song that I put out
Okay.
last month. And the reason why I say this is because the first half is completely instrumental. And it's like what we were talking about earlier with getting really into the mood.
Mhm.
And I'd recommend you listening to that song. And just, it's a short song too. It's only 2.5 minutes. And it's, I think, a really great introduction to me and my story and what I care about.
Nice. So you mentioned that you have some newer music that you're working on. Tell us what's coming up for you and what you're currently in the moment, like in progress with.
Great. Yeah, so my new album, The Carpet Maker, is coming out on May 15th. And this is the project that is the beginning of my new genre, which I call arabesque folk, which I talked about at the beginning. And I think it's a really great, it's a debut in itself. And I'm super excited to share it with people. And I'm so eager to like get back into the studio immediately after it's out. And, um, we have a lot of great like live sessions planned, a lot of great music videos we have planned, and also, an album release show in the works. And I just love that this album was such a communal experience in writing it and recording it and just bringing people together. And now that we're, starting to play the songs live, it's just been a really wonderful communal experience.
Now that you have, all these things in the works and you've got like these certain kind of milestones that you're working on, releasing songs, music videos, do you have an idea of your I've made it moment?
That's a really awesome question. I think I've always said this historically, and I don't know if I still believe this, but I'll share it because I've always said this when I first started making music, that my big three are NPR Tiny Desk concert,
Okay.
a Hot Ones interview, um, and the third one, I'm forgetting what the third one is. Oh, and Genius
Okay.
Lyrics video. I think I honestly quite agree with NPR still. If I were doing an NPR Tiny Desk concert, it would be kind of an I made it moment for me for sure.
Yeah.
And especially, they're really opening up to a lot of different types of music. So I think it would be a really wonderful fit. Especially, our live set is very stripped. It's very DIY. It's very like we've played in people's living rooms several times. So it's a fun vibe. I've also, I've gone to so many shows in New York. I'm going to a show at Brooklyn Steel tomorrow. And so I think getting to play at a venue like the Brooklyn Steel would definitely be, one of those I made it moments. I think
Yeah.
another thing would be collaborations with some of the artists who've inspired me, both from the American folk genre and in Arabic music. I think
Yeah.
there are some artists that I would just like love to just meet, not even collab with, like just meet and talk to them about their process. Even, novelists and writers from that part of the world, getting to talk to them about their process and just, really connecting on what we all have in common in this
Yeah.
story. I think that would be I think my main goal has turned into like just forming this community and my music being something that people can bond over in this like shared story. And I think I experienced something similar to that at the last show that I played a few weeks ago. And it was just a wonderful community of people who also like didn't necessarily know me or like what music I made. They just saw that there was, this, Egyptian American artist playing. They were like, I'll be willing to check it out. And so that's the first time I really ever had people come to my show that way. And it was just a really wonderful experience getting to talk to people and being like, oh, like, who do you know here? Who invited you? They're like, oh, we just came because we wanted to come. And like, oh, wow. Like, I didn't know, like, I didn't know, like, my music was cool like that.
Yeah.
So I think, kind of build ups of those moments, I think in the future would be a wonderful kind of I made it moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I look forward to talking to you after your first Tiny Desk concert.
Oh, thank you very much.
Well, tell us where we can follow your story, your music, your journey. Where can people find you?
So everything, my home base is my website, michaelisaak.us, and that's Isaac, Isaak. And all my music is on Spotify under my name, and my Instagram handle and TikTok and YouTube is all Michael Isaac Music.
Perfect.
And I also encourage people to check out my Bandcamp. And Bandcamp's a really awesome way people can directly support artists and
Mhm.
buy the music directly, and also order CDs and merch. Hopefully, I'll have some more merch up there soon, and
Yeah.
be a great way to support directly.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out today to tell us a little bit more about your story. I loved learning more about you and your background and what kind of work and study and effort went into your music making. And I look forward to the new stuff that's coming out too.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you, and yeah, I'm just really excited for this album to come out.